Hello there, wonderful students. Welcome to Educate. And this video will be continuing from where we left off. In our previous video, we talked about atomic spectra. We introduced the wave-particle duality of a light. I recommend that you watch that video first before proceeding with this one, which is the video based on the early models of the atom. Okay, so first of all, what actually sparked a scientist to be able to find out more about the atom? Basically, scientists wanted to get a clear explanation of why atomic spectra exist, because in our previous video, remember I explained to you that we have got three types of spectrum. We have got continuous spectrum, absorption spectrum, emission spectrum. So all of these were being observed using Isaac Newton's prism, and scientists were really confused. Why is light being absorbed and why is light being emitted as well? So they wanted to try kind of deduce a scientific solution or a scientific theory to be able to explain why light behaved in this particular way when it was passed through a prism. So first of all, we are going to look at the J.J. Thomson's model of the atom. But prior to that, we have got the Dalton's model. So Dalton was one of the earliest scientists to be able to suggest the existence of an atom. Dalton actually suggested that all matter is made up of smaller units that are indivisible, and those smaller units are known as atoms. So each and every object that exists on Earth, it is made up of some atoms, whether it is you as a human being or your car or your box or anything that exists on Earth, anything that is matter, that has got some mass and occupies some space, it is made up of atoms. So J.J. Thomson now took it to that level in 1898, where he suggested the plum pudding model. So in the plum pudding model, as displayed by the diagram here, he described the atom as a region in which positive charge is spread out in space. So his description of an atom, or his model that he made, or maybe based on what he thought an atom is, he said that an atom is just a region that is full of positive charges. So his atom was actually focused on the presence of many positive charges. It is spread out in space, or it is spread out in a spherical shape. And then we have got some electrons that are embedded throughout this region of positive charge. When we look carefully at this plum pudding model, you can see that this pink region, all of this pink region, it is a region of positive charge. So J.J. Thomson actually suggested that the atom, it is full of positive charge, and then the electrons were just a small dots that were embedded, or small dots that were attached to this region of positive charge. So in his way of thinking, he devised this as the model of an atom, because he thought that there is more positive charge distributed, and the electrons are just a couple of dots that are on top of them, that are on top of the positive charge. So that is known as the plum pudding model. Okay, so we can just liken the positive charge to a watermelon, to a watermelon. And then now we're gonna say that the electrons, they are kind of like the seeds. Okay, they're just seeds that are embedded into the entire space of the watermelon. Or you can say that these electrons, they look like they are raisins on top of the plum or something like that. That's why it's known as a plum pudding model. But his whole idea when he made this theory was to say that an atom is just a region that is full of positive charges, and then in this region full of positive charges, there are some electrons that are attached in this region. Electrons are negatively charged, of course. All right. So now Ernest Rutherford actually came out in 1911. That is how many years later? Just a couple of years later, after J.J. Thomson. And Ernest Rutherford's model was actually trying to prove Rutherford wrong, and Ernest Rutherford was proving J.J. Thomson's model wrong. Okay, so why would Ernest Rutherford want to prove J.J. Thomson's model wrong? Because he thought that J.J. Thomson's model of the atom, the plum pudding model, is not enough to be able to explain, okay, to be able to explain why atoms behave that way. It cannot explain why light is creating different types of spectrum when it passes through a certain gas. So in 1911, Ernest Rutherford, he and his students, they actually performed a critical experiment that showed that Thomson's model could not be correct. So they disproved Thomson's model. How did they do that? They bombarded some alpha particles through a thin metallic foil. Okay, so basically they used some alpha particles. The alpha particles, we are talking about helium nuclei. So we're talking about helium nuclei. Those are known as alpha particles. So they bombarded them, or they kind of shot them onto a gold metal foil. Okay, so when these alpha particles were shot or were bombarded on this target, or on this gold model, metal foil, there were certain observations that were made. Most of the particles, this is the most important thing about Ernest Rutherford's model, most of the particles, most of them, most of the alpha particles, or most of these helium nuclei, they were deflected. It means that they were scattered around. So they were scattered around to different places. Okay, so this actually proved in some way, using calculations, that actually the positive charge in an atom was actually concentrated at a small region relative to the size of the atom. And that is when he suggested that an atom must have a nucleus that has got positive charges. Remember that J.J. Thomson's model, it was saying that an atom, it is just a region that is full of positive charges, and it has got a couple of electrons embedded on top of it. So by performing this experiment, Ernest Rutherford with his students, they were able to disprove that, because the alpha particles, since they were scattered, this actually proved that most of the positive charge is actually found in a small region, or it is actually found in a small place, in a smaller area. And this area, it is the nucleus. And it is the nucleus. And the nucleus is small when you compare it to the size of the entire atom. So this is actually the model that was suggested by Ernest Rutherford. This is known as the planetary model of the atom, which suggested that there is a nucleus at the center, and the nucleus consists of positive charge that is concentrated in it, and then it is way smaller than the entire atom. So this is the suggestion that was made by Ernest Rutherford's nuclear model, or planetary model. But this also had a classical shortfalls as well. There were problems with these models of the atom, because it still could not explain some of the things. Because according to classical electromagnetism and your classical mechanics, you need to understand that first of all, before you even go to the classical one, the model that Ernest Rutherford suggested, it clearly could not explain why the atoms emit and absorb certain frequencies of electromagnetic radiation. Because remember, guys, that I said what actually stimulated the discovery of the atom is the fact that there was emission and absorption of certain frequencies of electromagnetic radiation. Because if we go back to where I introduced this whole thing, I explained clearly that whenever you pass light through the prism, it forms some spectrum. But if you're going to pass it through a cooler gas, the spectrum will start changing. It can either become an absorption spectrum or an emission spectrum. So Ernest Rutherford's model was good for that time, but it was not really enough to be able to explain why the atoms were emitting and absorbing certain frequencies of electromagnetic radiation. It could not explain why the light was having a dark spots. Okay, because at first the light was proven to be a continuous spectrum. It was proven to be a spectrum of colors that are blended together seamlessly. This was proven by using Isaac Newton's prism. But now, after introducing a cooler gas, or a cloud of cooler gas, now the spectrum started to change. It started to change. It started to have like different styles. Now it has got dark lines in it. And they were asking themselves, why is the spectrum now changing? Because we've put some colder gas or cooler gas. All right. So Ernest Rutherford's model could not explain why atomic emission spectra and atomic absorption spectra is observed. So hence why they could not continue with it. And furthermore, if you look at the classical mechanics side of things, the electrons were undergoing a centripetal acceleration. Okay, so as the electron radiates, energy is carried away from the atom, and the radius of the electron's orbit actually decreases steadily until the electron actually self-destructs. So you already know that in classical mechanics, whenever we have got a centripetal force, then there is going to be a centripetal acceleration. So from the model, from the planetary model that was made by Ernest Rutherford, you can see that here we're having a what? We're having a nucleus here, right? And it's at the center. Yes, we agree. That's correct. And there is no problem because he did some discoveries with his students, right? But now this electron, since this electron is negatively charged, there is centripetal force that it is experiencing from this positively charged nucleus, because we know that positive and negative, they attract one another. So if we say that this positive charged nucleus is fixed at this point, it will keep on attracting the electron. It will keep on applying a force. Classical mechanics says that exactly. You guys learned of that probably in your physical physics 1 class. Okay, so basically, because the nucleus is positively charged, it is going to pull the electron towards it. That is why the electron will end up going towards the nucleus. Its distance relative to the nucleus will keep on decreasing until the electron eventually pops into the nucleus. Then the atom will be destroyed in that way. So his model could not be correct for that as well. So there are two main critiques or critical points based on his model. Yes, he was right by saying that the nucleus is at the center. We agree with him. 40 definitely we do agree with him on that one, but that could not explain why there is emission and absorption spectrum. And also, he could not explain, okay, classical mechanics wise, this electron, according to his model, this electron would experience some centripetal force, Fc. And that centripetal force, remember, is given by what? It is given by mv squared over r, right? From classical mechanics. So this electron could experience this centripetal force, and it will be eventually pulled into this nucleus. Then the atom will be destroyed. Hence, we say that we still disqualify the Ernest Rutherford model at the planetary model of an atom. Then we have got the final model, which was accepted and acceptable, still is acceptable in the scientific notation, scientific community, the Bohr model. So Niels Bohr in 1918 now came and fixed Rutherford's stability issue, because Rutherford's issue was that the electron would actually be taken by centripetal force, and it will be like attracted by the nucleus. And when it is attracted by the nucleus, taken by this centripetal force, then it means that the electron would eventually pop into the nucleus. So Niels Bohr's model was to actually fix that. Okay, so he fixed this stability issue. So basically, how did he do that? So there are four postulates of Bohr's model. There are four postulates of Bohr's model of an atom. All right. The Bohr's model of an atom is the one that is commonly used. Whenever you get introduced to this, they usually put a nucleus and they put some positive charges, and around it they put some electrons. This is the most widely used atomic model that people actually knew from younger ages and your smaller levels of school or something like that. All right. So these are the four postulates. So these are Bohr's postulates. So the Bohr's postulate actually describing how Niels Bohr was viewing the atomic model. How did he imagine the atom? And he was trying to explain all the gaps that Rutherford could not be able to cover. All right. So the first postulate that Bohr suggested or proposed is that the electron moves in circular orbits around the proton under the influence of electric force of attraction. This one was not really that is new, because Ernest Rutherford said that we have a nucleus that is positively charged and an electron, and they are at a certain distance. So when Bohr is saying that the electron is being attracted by the nucleus, that is just still centripetal force. So we still have got a centripetal force of attraction that is experienced by this electron. So the electron, as it orbits around the nucleus, it is still experiencing a centripetal force. Okay, so we cannot really say that it's a new thing that was invented by Bohr, of course, but it is, we can just say that both Rutherford and Bohr, they kind of contribute to this. So the nucleus is still at the center, and it has got the positive charges, aka your protons, right? And then around it, there are electrons, and the electrons are orbiting. So we have an electron here that has got a certain mass, and it has got a charge that is negative. That's why you see a negative E. And it is being attracted. So we're having a centripetal force of attraction towards the nucleus. But now, let's now get to this juicy part. Because remember that when we disqualified a Rutherford's model, we said that Rutherford's model could not be correct because of centripetal force. I'm sure we said that centripetal force would pull the electron towards the nucleus. But in Bohr's case, we are not saying that. Why are we not saying that the electron will eventually go into the nucleus? It is because Bohr has got some other postulates. Okay, he said that only, by the way, only certain electron orbits are stable. And when in one of these stationary states, as Bohr called them, the electron does not emit energy in the form of radiation. So now Bohr further said that in his atomic model, the electron can only exist in one stationary state, a state that is constant, that is stationary. Okay, so the stationary state that he's talking about is actually known as the ground state. So when we say that an electron is in its ground state, it is grounded, or you can say that it is in its ground state. Okay, it is in its ground state. When it is in its ground state, particularly, it does not emit energy in form of radiation at all. So basically, this electron, as it is here at this exact position here, you can see that it is far away from the nucleus, right? This electron here, it does not emit any energy because it is in its ground state, or it is in its stationary state. So it is just orbiting around the nucleus in a uniform circular motion. It's just orbiting with uniform circular motion with a tangential velocity as well, but it does not emit any radiation. So the radiation is not being emitted at all. So basically that's what he made sure of. And since it's not emitting any radiation, then it means that it is not going to get closer to the nucleus. It's not going to be pulled closer to the nucleus. Because if it's being pulled closer to the nucleus, it will release some radiation. That is actually what that was one of the problem with a Rutherford model. Rutherford model was saying that the electron can just freely orbit the way it wants. Okay, but if there's centripetal force here, the electron will get closer to the nucleus, and as it gets closer to the nucleus, it loses energy. It loses energy, of course, and that energy will be released as a radiation. So the electron continues to radiate. That's what we said in Rutherford's model. And energy is carried away from the atom. Okay. But now when we go to the Bohr's model clearly states that when an electron is in a stationary state, or when an electron is in a stable orbit, this path here, when an electron is in a stable orbit, it does not emit any energy. It does not release any radiation at all. So it means that it remains in the same position relative to the nucleus. So this electron here, it remains in the same position relative to the nucleus. It will continue orbiting around here, but the distance between the electron and the nucleus will always be fixed because it is not emitting any energy. Because once that distance changes between the nucleus and the electron, then energy will somehow be released. Okay, that's how the potential energy works, right? The electric potential energy, that's how it works. And you guys have already done electricity. So there is no energy that's going to be released if this electron stays in the same orbit at an equal distance from the nucleus. Even if it happens that your electron has orbited and it is now here, let's just say your electron orbited and it is now here. If you look at its distance between the distance between itself and the nucleus, it is still the same even if it is at any other point of the orbit. Okay, so basically, as it is in a fixed position relative to the nucleus, then it does not emit any energy. So it means that the electron does not actually accelerate towards the nucleus. It does not actually clash into the nucleus as the Rutherford's model was suggesting. So this is how a Bohr was viewing things. Okay, so he was explaining why the electron will stay in one place. It is because it is in a stationary state. It does not emit any energy in form of radiation. It just keeps on orbiting and orbiting, and there is no radiation that you can see. There is no electromagnetic radiation that you can see. But now, look at how careful does Bohr explain the emission spectrum and the absorption spectrum. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, that I said that atoms, let's just say, if you put a cooler gas there, it is going to absorb some of the wavelengths of light. And if you're going to put a hotter gas, it is going to emit specific wavelengths of light. Okay, so basically, the interesting thing is how Bohr explains that. Now, Bohr explains that by explaining that whenever an atom emits radiation, he now covers the radiation concept. He is the only scientist in the ones that I've stated that is explaining why radiation happens. When the atom emits radiation, when the electron makes a transition, this is when an electron transitions from a more energetic initial orbit to a lower energy orbit. This is only when radiation is emitted. Now, let's explain this clearly using diagrams so that you can understand. Just going to make the words a bit smaller. So basically, an electron has got different energy states. An electron has got different energy states depending on how far it is from the nucleus. All right. So if we take a nucleus here, it's positively charged. We put an electron here and just say this is our first orbit. And we put another orbit here. We put another electron here. The electron that is far away from the nucleus. Okay, listen carefully on this one. The electron that is far away from the nucleus, it has got more energy than the electron that is closer to the nucleus. That is very clear because remember that when these charges get closer to one another, they tend to go to a state of lower energy, right? All right. So when you talk about, let's just say this is electron A, the blue electron, all right, and the red electron, which is electron B here. When we compare their energies, their potential energies due to the nucleus here, this blue electron here, which is electron A, it has got less potential energy than B. Why does electron B have more potential energy, electric potential energy? It is because it is far away from the nucleus, right? Okay, it is far away from the nucleus. So the further you go away from the nucleus, the greater the energy becomes, okay? So now to explain this thing of atomic radiation, we're just going to use these lines and say that the first energy level, we're going to call it n is equals to 1. The second one is n is equals to 2. The third one, 3. The fourth one, 4, and so forth. So n is equals to 1, 2, 3, and 4. So these energy states, I'm just representing them using lines so that you can see. Otherwise, these are just orbitals. Okay, so when I'm talking about n is equals to 1, we are talking about the first orbital. We're talking about this first orbital here. This is n is equals to 1. This is the first orbital. When I'm talking about n is equals to 2 in this model, this is the second orbital. N is equals to 3 would be the third orbital, and so forth and so on. So now, the first orbital, or the orbital that is the most closest to the nucleus, is known as the ground state orbital. So when an electron is on the first orbital, it is at its ground state. It is at its ground state. So when you say that the electron it is at its ground state, it means that it does not emit any radiation. That is what Bohr's postulate was stating there, to say that only certain electron orbits are stable when in one of these stationary states, okay, the electron does not emit energy in form of radiation. So this is clear that here, when an electron is in its ground state, which is the energy level number 1, n is equals to 1, okay, it is in its ground state. So this number n, it is actually known as a principal quantum number. Okay, it's known as a principal quantum number. We are still going to do quantum numbers in a later video, but this n is known as a principal quantum number. So the principal quantum number, what does it describe? The principal quantum number, it tells you the energy level, and the energy level depends on the distance from the nucleus. If we are closer, if the electron is closer to the nucleus, if an electron is on the first orbital, for example, in this case, the electron here is on the first orbital, or on the first orbital that's close to the nucleus, it's going to have less energy. It's going to have some ground state energy. There is a certain value for the energy, yes, but this is the energy level. The energy level is represented by this number n. Whenever you see the value n, it is known as the energy level, the principal quantum number. But it's something that we're still going to do as we progress. Okay, so one thing that happens here, if it happens, okay, let's just say your electron is in its ground state here, so it means the electron is at its first orbital, the orbital that is the most closest to the nucleus. It has less energy. Not that it has got zero energy, that's false. It has got less energy. Specifically, it has got negative 13.6 electron volts of energy. But you are still going to learn how the calculations go. But for now, the electron, when it is at its ground state, it is at its lowest energy possible. So when you give the electron energy, how do you give some electrons energy? Because you can't see them. You use heat. Heat is energy, guys. If you take heat and you heat an atom, the atom, remember that it is just indivisible. You cannot see it with your own naked eyes. But if you apply some heat to a material, then the electrons will be excited. So the electrons will move to a state of higher energy levels. So the electrons will move to a state of higher energy levels. In other words, we're trying to say that the electrons will move far away from the nucleus, because I told you guys that the further away you go from the nucleus, the greater the energy becomes. So if this is your nucleus and you have got an electron here in the first orbital or in the ground state, and it happens that I apply some heat to the electron, or maybe I give it some heat, maybe I take a lighter or anything that will give some heat energy, okay, then this electron would be able to do what? It will be able to bump off, it will be able to move away from the nucleus into another orbital. Maybe there are other orbitals here, okay, so the electron will be able to move from that first orbital into another orbital. So it is moving to a state of higher energy. Where did it get the energy from? The energy, it is getting the energy from the heat that I'm giving it, right? I'm heating this atom. I'm heating the material. If we become practical, because we can't see atom, right? But if we become practical, I'm heating the material. If I'm heating a material, its electrons will be excited. They will move. They will have more energy. So they will absorb energy. They will absorb the heat that I'm giving them. So one thing that you should note here is that electrons, they absorb energy. So electrons absorb energy. Electrons absorb energy. And when electrons absorb energy, they move to an excited state. So the state that they move to move to an excited state, right? So whenever you hear the word state in physics, we're talking about the energy level. That's the meaning of the word state. So the electrons, they absorb energy. That's the main point. They're absorbing energy so that they can move to an excited state. An excited state simply means that this is a state of higher energy. So this is when an electron has got higher energy. The ground state, the electron has got the lowest energy possible. So in the ground state, the electron has got the lowest energy possible. The lowest energy possible. It is the most closest to the nucleus at this point. So when you give some heat, the electrons will absorb that heat to move to an excited state or to a state of higher energy. Maybe your electron will now move to the level 3. So it moved from energy level 1 to energy level 3. So at first, initially, it had an energy level which was equals to energy level 1. That was its initial amount. And next, it has got the final energy level, which is energy level number 3. So it moved from energy level number 1 to energy level number 3. So it has absorbed some energy, or we can say that it has moved away from the nucleus. It was here and it moved away from the nucleus. Okay. But now the thing is, the electrons, they stay temporarily in an excited state. So electrons stay temporarily in an excited state. Electrons stay temporarily in an excited state. Temporarily in excited states. Why do electrons stay temporarily in an excited state? It is because they cannot be able to handle the energy for a long time. It is not stable. Remember, guys, we say that the ground state is the most stable one. We say that only certain electron orbits are stable. And when in one of these stationary states, the electrons do not radiate any energy. So the electrons want to always be stable. They want to always have to be in a lowest energy possible. But if you give them some energy, they will be excited. They will absorb the energy. They will absorb the energy that you give to them. And after absorbing the energy, they will stay there at that energy level temporarily for a short while. After just a couple of minutes, they will start decaying, or the electrons will start moving from that high energy level back again to the ground state. Why is the electron coming back to the ground state again? This is because it cannot stay in an unstable state. If something has got high energy in physics, then it is unstable. But if it has got lower energy, it is stable. So the electrons, when you give them some energy, maybe you heat them or you give them some heat energy or anything like that, they will definitely absorb the energy. They will move away from the nucleus, or they will move to a higher energy state. And after moving to a higher energy state, what will happen? They will stay here at the high energy state temporarily for a short while because they are unstable. So this state here, it is somehow unstable. This high energy state that you have moved your electrons to by giving it energy, it is an unstable state. So the electron now needs to decay, ladies and gentlemen, students. The electron needs to decay here. It is to go back to the ground state. So now what happens to the energy that it absorbed? Because we said that for the electron to move from a lower energy state to a higher energy state, it absorbed some energy. There was an absorption of energy there. Now that it has absorbed the energy, what will happen to the energy if it is going to go back to a smaller ground state, to a lowest energy possible? What will happen to the energy that the electron contains? What will happen to the energy that the electrons absorbed? That energy will now be released, because basically if we say that the electron will move back to the ground state, it has to release the energy that it had. And when this energy is released, it is released in form of photons. The energy is released in form of photons, or it is released in form of light, because photons are just particles of light. So this is how Niels Bohr is explaining the concept of what? The concept of absorption spectrum and emission spectrum. So whenever we take a hot gas, if we take a hot gas and we say that we put a hot gas here and we put a prism between them and we want to observe the spectrum, when we see an emission spectrum, that emission spectrum, where is the light coming from? It is the electrons that are releasing the energy that they had absorbed at first. Okay, so in summary, this is how Bohr is trying to explain why atoms absorb and emit radiation. So when they are absorbing energy, that's where you get your absorption spectra, your absorption spectrum. You get your absorption atomic spectrum. But now when they are emitting, when they are now going back to the ground state, when they are now going back to a stable state, because they only stay there temporarily, they will now be emitting. They will emit the energy. They will release that energy that they absorbed, and they will release it in form of photons, and photons are just particles of light. So effectively here, they are releasing light in return. So this is how Bohr majestically explained why the atomic spectrum is happening, because the scientists, they didn't know anything at first. The scientists were just intrigued by this prism to say, why is the prism absorbing some lines here? Why is the prism emitting some lines here? What is happening with the gas? Now Bohr model was able to explain now to say that for an atom to be able to emit radiation, for an atom to emit radiation, the electron must make that transition from a more energetic initial orbit to a lower energy orbit. And the difference between the energy levels, which is initial energy level minus final energy level, is equals to H times F. So it is equals to H times F. Remember that H times F, we use it to describe the energy of a photon, right? And we say that as these electrons are decaying, or they are moving from a high energy state to a lower energy state, they release energy in form of photons. These photons are just particles of light, and they have got a certain energy level. And the energy level that they have is given by E is equals to H times F, where H is the Planck's constant, which is equals to 6.63 multiplied by 10 to the power of minus 34. And then you're going to write the units. That's going to be joules per hertz as well. So this is the Planck's constant here. This is to describe the energy of a photon that is released when an electron decays, or when an electron moves from a high energy state to a lower energy state, because it needs to be stable. Otherwise, it won't be able to stay there for a long time. It always wants to stay at the ground state, at the lowest energy possible. Hence, we say that for us to be able to find the energy of this photon, for us to be able to find the energy of the photon released, the energy of the photon released will just be equal to the initial energy minus the final energy. We can just put an absolute value sign there, and this is equals to H times F. Why did we make a difference between initial energy and final energy? Obviously, we would know how much energy is being released there. Okay, but the mathematics part of it, I'm going to do it in another separate video. In this video, I just wanted to clearly mention so that you guys can understand the basics, just the basic early models of the atom and why they are relevant for us to study as physics students. Thank you so much for watching this wonderful video, ladies and gentlemen. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Tell your friends to also stay tuned.